Hello everyone, this is part 7 of What If Naruto Made the Ultimate Sacrifice, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Naruto fell to his hands and knees as the sweat glistened off his body. He panted, exhausted from his training. It had been 2 weeks since he had been an examiner for the survival test in the Chunin exams. Since then, his time had been spent training in order to improve his skills. His kenjutsu lessons with Genma were still proceeding and he was now applying the principles of kenjutsu to his Suansha Heijin technique. However, Sasuke had stopped coming to training ever since he found about the death of Naruto and was also a lot more distant. Naruto let a smile appear across his face before he began to laugh. His laughter increased as he rolled onto his back and looked at the base of the tree he was laying at. Following its bark up, his eyes set upon the special seal required in order to perform the Hiraishin no Jutsu. He let out a relaxed sigh, having finally performed the technique successfully after nearly 2 months of training. He was happy that he had completed the critical first step. Now he could easily figure out how to perform it while the seal was moving. He realized one problem which he hadn't foreseen at the beginning of his training. The seals were only capable of being used once, hence he would only be allowed to use a few kunai for practice. Altogether he had 51 of the special kunais required for the technique, consequently he had to make sure that he had enough remaining at the end of training since he could only use the seals with these special kunai. He closed his eyes, letting the sunlight hit his body, heating him up even more than he already was. His mind drifted to the Akatsuki and the fact that they would be here in a week. He could feel his insides boiling at the seriousness of the situation. Everything he had trained and worked so hard for would come to a head in a week's time. He got up from his position and walked over to his discarded shirt and jacket before putting them on. He decided to head home to freshen up before finding Sakura. XXXXXXXXXX. Sakura rubbed her temples before turning another page in the book she was currently reading. She had spent the majority of her time occupied in the personal library of the god, trying to discover some type of method to cure Naruto's condition. Her efforts had made little progress as there had been no recorded procedure or clue as to how to mature the coils of a person to their fully matured state. She closed the book, putting it aside before putting her head in her hands. She couldn't explain it, but she felt a lot more fatigued lately and her chest was giving her a tingling sensation. She began to massage the side of her head in an effort to try and awaken herself a little more. Although she was still as determined, she was beginning to lose hope. No progress, huh? The voice caused the pink-haired kunoichi to look at the doorway to the library. The Hokage made her way to the disorganized table and took a seat. Sakura sighed. No, she leaned back in her chair. If there is something in which an operation could help, it isn't in this library. Tsunade nodded. That means, we would have to start looking through Kinjutsu and find a way possibly to maybe even combine some ideas together. The legendary sucker put her chin on her palm before resuming. The Kazekage will be arriving in a week. I'm sure we could ask Tsunagakure for a few books to do with medicine and maybe even Kinjutsu. Sakura looked at her teacher. Would they give us important things like that? Tsunade shrugged. I'll just tell him it's to do with Naruto. The council of his might put up resistance, but I'm sure he'll be able to succeed. Sakura felt some hope enter her as she smiled. She sighed, putting her head in her hands once again and closing her eyes. Tsunade looked at her apprentice awkwardly, realizing the odd behavior she was displaying. She spoke calmly. Is everything all right? Sakura nodded her head before answering. It's nothing. I've just been feeling a lot more tired than usual lately. Tsunade raised an eyebrow since she knew that the medic nin would always be refreshed. Sakura had been spending large amounts of time studying lately, but there was still no reason to believe she would be this fatigued. How have you been feeling in the mornings? Sakura looked up at the busty blonde. Tsunade shook her head. Just answer the question. Sakura tucked her hair behind her ear. A little nauseous. I don't think it's anything to worry about. Tsunade's eyes widened as she felt her suspicions rise. She coughed, clearing her throat before she asked her next question, knowing it would cause the younger kunoichi to become embarrassed. What exactly did you and Naruto do that night? Sakura instantly looked at her mentor as she felt her cheeks become warm, tinting with the deepest of red. She began to stutter, nothing. Tsunade gave out a small chuckle. Sounds like you did something. Her expression turned serious, anxious of what kind of effect this could have on Naruto if her deduction turned out to be correct. I can't believe you couldn't figure this out on your own. Sakura recoiled at what she was assuming was an insult. Tsunade sighed, though I doubt you would have expected something like this to happen. She rose from her seat, walking towards the door. Come with me, we have a few tests to go through. Tsunade walked out into the hallway, her mind drifting to the most hyperactive ninja in Konoha. I should send a message to him. XXXXXXXXXX. Sasuke sat cross-legged in the Uchiha shrine, his demeanor calm and his eyes contemplative. He stared at the scroll in front of him, thinking of his lost family, his father from whom he always wanted acceptance and attention, and his mother who would always smile at him and uplift his heart, his elder brother whom he admired more than anyone else and wanted to surpass. Even though his childhood innocence had been short-lived, he still had the memories deeply implanted in his mind. He cherished those times and he knew that he shouldn't let himself be brought down by the past anymore. However, his future now seemed bleak. His return from Orochimaru was hard enough due to the fact that many mistrusted him. The price that was paid by the one shinobi who was the closest bond he had, lingered on his conscience relentlessly. He sighed looking at the scroll which held the darkest secrets of his clan and was the ultimate reason for the Uchiha. The visage of Itachi flashed through his mind, but it wasn't the one he was accustomed to seeing recently. It was the one from his days as a child when he would always ask him to train him. Forgive me, Sasuke. Next time. The black-haired teen raised his hand, slowly touching his forehead as his fingertips brushed the spot where he would always get flicked by his older brother. He began to think of their final encounter as the Itachi that day starkly contrasted from the one he remembered from his childhood. His eyes were emotionless and cold. Sasuke had anticipated that moment from the day he strengthened his resolve to become an Avenger. Nonetheless, as much as he hated his brother, when his lifeless body fell into his arms after their epic battle, he found that there was no sense of accomplishment within him. Instead, he felt his heart breaking when he saw the smile on his inert face. Power causes you to become isolated and arrogant. That day he wept for him as he did for the rest of his family. He was left as the last Uchiha and the only legacy of his legendary clan. He found contentment in knowing that as much as he had lost, he had still gained people who were important to him. The impending death of Naruto tore the remaining hope he had. He rose from his position, staring at the scroll in his hands with deep hatred. He flung it at the wall as it impacted before it fell on the floor, resounding in an echo throughout the silent atmosphere. His eyes dropped to the ground as he sighed. Was it really worth it, Oni-san? XXXXXXXXXX. Naruto walked through the familiar hallways as he approached the door to the Hokage's office. He had received notification through a bird messenger. It had taken him by surprise as he was just exiting the shower before it came screeching in and nearly crashed into his face. He had barely avoided it and let it go once it had become aware enough to fly. The message had told him to come to the Hokage due to an urgent matter. He whistled happily because of his success with his training. He opened the door but stopped when he saw that there were two occupants present. He smiled before calling out, Sakura-chan. I was going to look for you when I was done here. He rubbed his nose. Well, this does save me time. Sakura walked to the hyperactive ninja, giving him a small K which caused him to turn red. Tsunade coughed, interrupting him. I should leave you two alone. She rose from her seat and walked to the exit. Naruto scratched the back of his head. Nani? You called me here and now you're just going to leave without even telling me why. Tsunade sighed her head. You'll know why soon enough, but not from me. She left the office, closing the door behind her. Naruto tilted his head, confused, but quickly formed a grin as he jumped over the Hokage's desk and sat down on her chair. He put his feet on the desk and leaned back in the chair with his hands behind his head. I always wondered what it would feel like to do this. He began to laugh. Sakura stared at the genin, thinking of how to break the news to him. When she had first learned of it a few hours earlier, she was scared but soon calmed down and accepted it. The only thing remaining was Naruto, and she didn't know what his reaction might be. She coughed, clearing her throat as Naruto fiddled with the various objects on the Godime's desk. Naruto. Naruto looked up. Sakura swallowed the lump in her throat. I need to talk to you about something important. Naruto looked at her expectantly as silence loomed between the two. Yeah. The medic Nin gave a nervous chuckle, thinking of how to bring up the topic. Do you remember when Naruto raised an eyebrow before he understood what she was saying. His face flushed. You mean a couple of days ago? Sakura shook her head. Barker, I meant the first time. Naruto held his nose, trying to stop any bee that might try to break out as images flashed through his mind. Oh, yeah. Sakura knew that the blonde shinobi had no idea where she was heading with this. She walked towards him before taking a seat on the desk next to him. She sighed and let the distress show in her eyes. Naruto looked at the pink-haired beauty. What is it, Sakura-chan? Sakura stared into his oceanic eyes. I'm going to be a mother. Naruto's mouth fell open. Nani. He began to laugh at the kunoiki before jumping out of his seat and around the room. Sakura stared after the Jinchuriki as he flipped across the room, truly surprised by his reaction. Naruto landed on his feet but stopped as he fully understood what she just said. His eyes widened as he felt his heart bombarded with conflicting emotions. He stood there unmoving for a few minutes before speaking calmly, and I'm going to be a father. Sakura nodded. Hi. He turned to face her, a smile across his face, hiding what he was really feeling inside. Are you okay with this? Sakura got up from the desk, walking towards him, enveloping him in hug. Hi, a part of you will always be with me, we can be a family. Naruto wrapped his arms around her as his face was hidden from her view. The words family struck an emotion deep within his heart. I'm not going to be. He was off from finishing as Sakura shook her head in his embrace. You will be, I'll make sure of it. Naruto smiled as he stopped any tears from falling. He was happy to know that the medic was trying her hardest to try and save him, but he didn't expect anything. He was satisfied knowing that she cared. His mind currently lingered on his yet-to-be-born child. His heart panged with hurt as he tried to understand what he should do. He separated from Sakura before speaking. I have to do something, I'll see you later. He walked away from her to the window and gave a wave in her direction before jumping out. Sakura concentrated on his figure disappearing into the distance before she began to think of their unborn child. From what she could tell of the Jinchuriki's reaction, he was slightly disturbed with the news. She figured it was because of the fact that he wasn't planning on being here for long. Her hand moved to her stomach as she stroked it. I will find a way. XXXXXXXXXXX. The Akatsuki members each stood on the fingers of the statue of the king of the underworld, which corresponded with the rings they were wearing. In the place of where the other members, that were now used to stand with their rings. The leader of the Akatsuki continued performing the Fuin Jutsu Genryu Fujin technique. The technique forcibly removed the spirit and the chakra of the tailed beast. He performed it on transferring it into the intimidating and towering statue. The 10 dragon-like energy figures surrounding the host of the Hachibi swirled around his body one last time before removing the tailed beast within. The energy flew into the statue before the mouthpiece fell back into place in its mouth. There were a total of 9 eyes on its frightening face. The 8th eye opened slowly, signaling the success of the jutsu. Only the eye in the center remained closed. The body of the Jinchuriki fell onto the floor hardly. Deidara sighed. That took long, yeah. Toby laughed. I didn't realize it that much. It must mean I'm getting stronger than you, senpai. The blonde criminal's gaze pierced his partner. Don't get ahead of yourself, yeah. The leader of the Akatsuki spoke in an authoritative tone. Stop your bickering. The two quieted down as they stared at their leader in silence. There is only one remaining. Deidara nodded. We'll be in Konoha for the finals, yeah. The leader of the notorious organization looked at Deidara and Toby. Make sure the plan proceeds flawlessly. Toby gave a victory sign with his hand as his and Deidara's forms faded, leaving only the 3 physically present figures in the cave. Zetsu jumped from his spot on the statue's finger onto the ground. He spoke emotionlessly. So you will be leaving for their positions soon. He took the silence as a confirmation. The female member of the Akatsuki ran her hand through her hair. Well, I've done my part. I'll be here for the final ceremony. She vanished from her position, leaving only Zetsu and the leader. The shadowed figure prepared to leave before turning back to face Zetsu. Get rid of her. XXXXXXXXXX. Naruto looked across the village of Konoha from his spot on top of the Yondaim's head. His heart was in turmoil and his mind was focused on his unborn child. The sun was lowering into the horizon, the light slowly fading. He had always been alone when he was a child and had never known who his parents were. The thought of where they were and why he was alone continuously ate him up on the inside. He would always look on in envy when the other children's parents would come to collect them from the academy. He would feel his heart breaking whenever he saw a father and his child sharing a bowl of food while they laughed. The feeling of loneliness would engulf him whenever he saw a mother pushing her daughter on a swing. It was hard to see them so comfortable and happy while he suffered because he never understood why he was in such a situation. He knew how hard it was to not know about your parents. He thought about his unborn child, wondering whether it would also share the same experience. He knew that Sakura would always be there, but would his absence cause pain? I told you not to talk to him, go away, monster. The words of the villagers stung his heart as he remembered them. Would his child be treated the same way because of their connection? The people of Konoha had slowly started accepting him, but there was still a lot who detested him because of the Kyuubi. A tear escaped his eye as he knew that he wouldn't ever see his own child's face. He had wanted a family ever since he was young. He had finally gotten together with the girl of his dreams and they were now going to have a child. But he wouldn't be there for its first steps, its first words, or its first smile. He wiped the tears that were falling from his eyes, reaching into his pouch. He pulled out a thick book along with a pen. He knew that he wouldn't be there for him, but he would leave something behind so that his child would know who his father was. He didn't want it to experience the same ache that he had. Slowly opening the book to its first page, he brought his pen to its blank surface and began to write. That's enough, we should stop. Genma lowered his katana as he spoke to Naruto. The Junin had been teaching Naruto for quite some time now and found that the Jinchuriki was very good at picking up the tips and advice he provided. Every time he looked into the younger shinobi's eyes, he could see a determined fire burning like no other. He coughed before sheathing his katana. Naruto wiped the sweat from his forehead with his forearm. Hey, you were just worried that I was gaining the advantage. He turned to the side upon hearing a disapproving sound and saw Tenten shaking her head. The kunoichi had become his sparring partner ever since Sasuke had stopped. He had primarily been reluctant to ask her but went ahead anyways since she did offer him help at the party over a month ago. She gladly accepted and began to help with his sessions of kenjutsu with Genma. It seemed pretty even to me. Naruto laughed, cancelling his technique as his weapons of wind slowly disappeared into the humid air surrounding him. I have more stamina than the both of you. That's why Genma-sensei stopped. He looked at the Junin with a grin. You were getting tired, weren't you? Tenten raised an eyebrow in the direction of the senbon chewing shinobi. Genma coughed, aware of the scrutiny he was under. Rolling the senbon needle in his mouth from one side to the other, he replied calmly, don't be so hasty. Naruto began to laugh at the older ninja's failing attempt to defend his pride. He clutched his stomach as he felt his insides about to rip apart. The expression on his face was priceless. His laughter was reciprocated by Tenten, who let go of her unpleasantness at having the spar stopped. Genma's sweat dropped at the display but waved it off. Whatever, I might have been getting tired, but the real reason I stopped was because it's close to noon. Naruto wiped the tears from his eyes, facing his teacher. What does that matter? Normally we train for a lot longer. Tenten stopped laughing as she became aware of the real reason why Genma stopped. She addressed Naruto, you're the one who asked to stop at noon. Naruto looked at the weapons specialist quizzically. I did. Genma sighed at his obliviousness. Have you forgotten already? The Junin assumed it was because of their training since Naruto seemed to concentrate extremely on their exercises and spars. You wanted to greet Kazekage-sama when he arrives. Naruto's eyes widened as he shook his head. He couldn't believe he had forgotten about that. He had been anticipating the leader of Sunagaku's arrival ever since Sakura had informed him about the time of his expected advent. The last occasion he had met the former Jinchuriki was when he had been captured by Akatsuki and subsequently rescued by him and Kakashi. Kuso, I'm going to be late. He turned running away from the training ground, waving back at Tenten and Genma. The weapons specialist saw the eccentric blonde vanish from her line of sight before she turned to the Junin to her side. Genma. The Junin fiddled the senbon needle in his mouth. Tenten folded her arms. Don't you think he pushes himself too much? She had been training with the hyperactive ninja for a month now and instantly realized the limits he would push himself to. At first she couldn't believe it, but Naruto was worse than Lee when it came to training. Their spars varied from a 2-on-1 against him, or she and Genma rotated, constantly taking turns. Naruto would continue without taking a rest. His stamina seemed to be monstrous, but she soon realized that he was just forcing himself to believe that he could continue, as he would collapse at the end of the day. Genma turned to look at the kunoichi, who had a worried expression across her face. He waited a few minutes before answering. He does. The kunoichi rubbed the side of her arm where she had a bruise, courtesy of one of Naruto's attacks. Why though? I've never seen someone push themselves this much. He walks away from us nearly and comes back the next day as if nothing has happened. Genma rested his hand on the hilt of his katana. Only through dedication and perseverance can a person become strong. He paused slightly before resuming. I found it strange as well when I received the mission to train him. I thought that there was an ulterior reason for him trying so hard, and yesterday my suspicions were confirmed. Tenten waited for the Junin to continue. What suspicions? Genma shook his head. Gomen, I can't tell you why. The weapons specialist instantly protested. Why not? It's classified information, but what I will say is that it's to do with all the shinobi in the village being put on high alert and reporting anything out of the ordinary. He began to walk to leave the training ground. He stopped, adopting a smile. Naruto, it's amazing the person he has become, especially after all he has been through. His voice was calm. I am proud to have been the teacher of a shinobi like him, even if it has been for a short amount of time. Tenten listened to Genma as he spoke, noticing the respect flowing in his voice. She dwelled on the Junin's last words. The one clear thing was that Naruto's diligence was connected to the village being on high alert. That meant the Genin was expecting something. She made her way to leave, her mind on the most hyperactive ninja in Konoha. XXXXXXXXXX. Gaara sat quietly with his arms folded and legs crossed. He was in a carriage bound for Konoha, much to his discontent. The red-haired teen preferred to travel the normal way, however his counsel insisted that he shouldn't. The journey to the village of Konoha was prolonged by an extra 2 days due to the fact they had to stop many times in order for the horses pulling the carriage to rest. The environment was very calm and he could hear the various sounds from outside, including the singing of the birds as well as the horses' feet hitting the ground. The carriage rocked steadily as he remained seated on a relaxing cushion with his eyes closed. Temari looked at her brother, who was tranquilly sitting without making a movement. She was always amazed at the amount of patience he had. She didn't like prolonged silences, but she had gotten used to such an atmosphere since going on missions with Gaara as a child. During her childhood, going against Gaara's wishes or disturbing him was a dangerous action, however she now stayed quiet out of respect for her younger brother. The lure of cage came with many responsibilities and Gaara was kept busy constantly with his workload, hence when he got time for some peace, she would readily coincide with his wishes and not perturb him. As cold as Gaara had been the past, he was steadily improving. There was now no need for her or Kankuro to fear approaching him, and they did so comfortably. They found that he would even attempt to strike conversations with them at times, even if they were just a few words on his part. Her mind drifted to the events from months prior when Gaara had been captured by the organization of Akatsuki. She was worried for her brother's safety deeply, and in the end everything was resolved for the better. Due to the efforts of the Leaf Nin, Gaara was saved from death. The shinobi who played a large role in his rescue as well as his resurrection was also the one who had inspired him to change in the first place. In her eyes, Naruto, at first, was just a noisy blonde with an enormous amount of energy, but she slowly began to understand how big of a heart he truly possessed. During the Chunin exams 3 years ago, Naruto had fought with the red-haired teen in order to save his friends' lives. Even though they had such a great battle, Naruto was ready to risk his own life to save Gaara before they had even encountered each other again. She gazed at her younger brother, who had yet to make a move. She knew how high Gaara held the Uzumaki. She had learned from Kankuro about their conversation where Gaara had told him of Naruto being the reason why he wanted to change the way he lived. She respected the blonde shinobi a great deal for everything he had done for Gaara, but there was one thing she found intriguing. Gaara had said that Naruto had suffered like him. She wondered how he managed to stay as bright as he was if he experienced a similar childhood to that of Gaara's. The carriage slowed in pace before eventually coming to a halt. She heard some rustling before one of the escorts came to the door of the carriage. Kazekage-sama, we have arrived. Gaara opened his eyes, turning to the older man, okay. Temari picked up the large scroll next to her and her battle fan before exiting the carriage. Gaara followed suit, already equipped with everything he needed. He landed on the hard ground before turning to face the entrance gate of Konoha. The backdrop of Konoha greatly differed from that of Sunagakure. Its surrounding environment was covered in trees and vegetation, whereas the village of Suna was encircled by a desert and organic life was very rare. Gaara had been escorted by Temari and 5 Junin from his village. He walked towards the gate where the Godime and a few other shinobi stood. The team from Suna which had qualified for the finals was also present. Sunad waited as the Kazekage approached. Well, they arrived exactly on the time they expected to. She looked to her side at her apprentice. I'm sure they've got the information we asked as well. Sakura tilted her head. Hi, hopefully. Sunad took a glance around her. You said Naruto was coming. Where is he? Sakura gave a small laugh. He probably forgot. Sunad wasn't surprised as such behavior was common for the genin. She turned to face the Kazekage and his escorts as they arrived at their position. She adopted a smile. You're not late, which is good. The escorts of Gaara were taken aback at the unorthodox greeting, whereas the Kazekage remained with an impassive expression. Yeah. Gaara looked at the shinobi surrounding the Hokage. He recognized Sakura, but the other two were unfamiliar. He looked to the side as the team of Suna bowed and their instructor spoke. Kazekage-sama, we will make our village proud. Gaara stared at the team and their Junin instructor. The genins participating were around his age. The female genin looked up towards him but quickly averted her gaze downwards when she realized him looking at her. A slight tint of red was across her cheeks. Try your hardest. Temari smiled as she heard him speak some encouraging words, though they were few in number. She faced Sakura before holding out a large scroll towards her. This is what you asked for. Sakura looked at the large scroll before taking it off the sand nin, a sealing scroll. Temari nodded. It's got a few books on medicine and some scrolls to do with kinjutsu. We'll be expecting 'em back. Sakura smiled, thanking her. No problem. Their conversation was short as they heard a yell from the distance. She turned to find Naruto running towards them at a rapid pace. Naruto paused seconds before he made contact with Sakura. Brushing himself, he failed to recognize a fist heading towards his head. Itai. Sakura pulled back her fist. Barker. Calm down. Naruto rubbed his head. Gomen, I thought I was late. He looked past the kunoichi to see Gaara, Temari and the rest of the escorts staring at him. He walked forwards coughing before putting out a hand towards Gaara. Welcome. Gaara took his hand, shaking it, appreciating the gesture. Sunad inwardly smirked at Naruto. I think it's time we head off. We have things to discuss for the finals tomorrow. Gaara nodded before turning to the rest of his escorts. Take a break. Sunad walked away from the people in the direction of her office. Gaara followed but stopped before turning to Naruto. He paused momentarily, finding the right words. Good seeing you. His words left the people of the sand stunned, since they weren't used to him being pleasant with anyone. The Kazekage left them following the legendary sucker. Naruto scratched the back of his head. He's opening up slowly. Temari folded her arms. He is, but you're an exception. Naruto didn't understand what she was talking about but didn't pay much attention as he heard his stomach rumble. Hey, time to eat, I guess. He turned to the two kunoichi. You want to come? Temari shook her head. I'm going to go ahead to the Hokage. Gaara may want us to take a break, but it's best for me to be present. She walked away, leaving Naruto and Sakura. Naruto turned to Sakura. You're not going, are you? Sakura shook her head before wrapping her arms around his neck. Of course not. She gave a grin before leaning in to him. Naruto gladly complied before deepening it. Their little escapade was short as they heard a loud shout. Naruto Nichiren. The Konohamaru Corps stopped, their eyes bulging as they took in the sight of the beloved leader embracing an Ka girl. Naruto and Sakura separated and turned towards the three genin. Naruto stared at their unresponsive forms with a confused look. What? Konohamaru's countenance slowly turned into a sly grin. very smooth. I knew she had the hots for you for a long time. Naruto began to sweat, knowing exactly how Sakura would respond to such a statement. The pink-haired kunoichi had already put on her gloves, the scroll she was previously holding now on the ground. What did you say? Konohamaru regretted ever speaking, not believing he had forgotten the medic nin's temperament even if it had been for a few seconds. He pulled Udon in the way to protect himself. Naruto swiftly moved to Sakura, grabbing her from behind. He concentrated on Konohamaru. Tell me what you want before she KU. Konohamaru sweated as he saw Naruto try and control Sakura from breaking free. I just wanted to make sure you come to see my match tomorrow. Sakura struggled to break free from Naruto's iron grip. Shanaro. Let me go. Naruto nodded. Don't worry, I'll be there. The Konohamaru core smiled before waving and running away from the volatile kunoichi, aware of the dangerous atmosphere. Naruto smirked as he still had Sakura in his arms. Until you calm down, I'm not letting go. He leaned down, breathing on her neck and it softly, and I don't mind holding you for a long time. Sakura sighed. Fine. Let me go now, Barker. Naruto unenthusiastically let go of the pink-haired medic, a disappointed look on his whiskered visage. His stomach growled viciously. I need some ramen. XXXXXXXXXXX. Tsunade sat at her desk with a serious demeanor, having explained the situation to the Kazekage. Jiraiya was also in attendance, standing against the wall. Gaara was intrigued with the information, but he outwardly appeared the same. Tsunade broke the silence. The whole village is on high alert and all Junins and Anbu know the full details of the situation. Gaara nodded, thinking over what he had been told. The same organization that had come after him was going to attack Konoha, and they were after Naruto. Everything fell into place as he realized Naruto wasn't just a lonely child, but just like him, he also had the burden of a tailed beast. Jiraiya rubbed his temple. I wasn't told what time exactly they'll attack in the letter my informant left for me. But I think the most likely time will be once the final matches have already started. A lot of people will be in attendance this year because of the old man's grandson. Tsunade leaned back in her chair. I've put Junins on security to guard the village. The last thing we need is for them to get inside the village. Jiraiya closed his eyes. I doubt they'll be able to stop them for long. But if they make a big enough commotion to alert everyone else, that's good enough. According to my source, there are only 2 attackers coming. The plan could have easily changed though. Gaara listened intently, absorbing all the information. Does he know about this? Jiraiya understood he was talking about Naruto. He was the first person I told. Gaara turned to the Hokage. As our allies, you have my support. Tsunade smirked. I didn't expect anything less. She opened her drawer and placed a bottle of sake on the desk. Withdrawing a pack of cards, she looked at Jiraiya and Gaara. Who wants a game? Jiraiya shrugged before taking a seat and pouring himself some sake. Tsunade began to hand out cards as Jiraiya took a drink. Gaara sat still, confusion etched across his face. He wasn't used to such things, nor was he anticipating this to happen. As a Kage, he spent most of his time completing paperwork and in meetings. He was kept busy constantly, and in his spare time he trained himself. Tsunade recognized the awkward demeanor of the Kazekage. Jiraiya will explain the rules to you, it's simple. The frog hermit placed his cup of sake on the table, looking through his cards. You'll pick him up as you play. Gaara stared at the cards in front of him that he had yet to touch. He hadn't accepted to take part but was rather somehow dragged in. He slowly picked them up, observing the pictures drawn on them. He had no idea of what to do. The entrance door to the office opened, taking all the occupants by surprise. Tsunade didn't have enough time to react as she thought she had been caught red-handed by her assistant. She looked towards the doorway to find a kunoichi with blonde hair staring in the direction. Temari didn't know what to make of the sight in front of her. Tsunade was wiping her forehead, sighing, whereas Jiraiya continued to drink, not bothered. What caught her attention was Gaara had a number of cards in his hand, holding them incorrectly. His expression was blank as he stared at his older sister. Temari raised an eyebrow. What's going on? Tsunade sorted out her cards. You want to play? Sasuke stood leaning against one of the many stadium walls. His eyes were closed as he calmly awaited the arrival of the citizens of Konoha. The Uchiha had been placed as one of the many people guarding the stadium. He knew there was something awkward with the orders of the Hokage over the past few days. The whole village was put on high alert and all shinobi including Genin were to report any findings which seemed unusual. However, not everyone was told the reasoning as to why such an order was implemented. He remembered fighting in the same stadium against Gaara. The locale remained the same as it had been 3 years ago but with visible refurbishing, no doubt to fix the damage from the previous battles held here. Sasuke. The voice caused the black-haired teen to open his eyes and fixate on the figure of a lazy Junin. In front of him stood Kakashi along with his recognizable orange book in hand. What are you here for? Kakashi did something very out of character as he closed his book and placed it in the safe confines of his vest pocket. He walked to the railings looking over the large stadium as a few people made their way to the stands. I came to talk to you. Sasuke observed the Junin suspiciously, noting the serious tone in his voice. Go ahead. Kakashi began to speak, his one exposed eye peering over the gathering crowd. You know of Konoha's current status. Sasuke kept his eyes on the lazy Hatake. You came to talk me about why. Kakashi nodded before resuming. The reason why is because we're expecting visitors. Sasuke folded his arms. Who? Kakashi looked to the stadium floor as a familiar Hyuga made his way to the middle. Akatsuki. Sasuke's eyes twitched in recognition as he realized what their objective must be. They're coming for Naruto. Kakashi turned to face his fellow Sharingan wielder. Correct, they might already be in the vicinity. Sasuke walked towards the railings. You weren't supposed to tell me. Kakashi put his hands in his trouser pockets. No, only Junin and Anbu know the full details of the situation. Sasuke shook his head. Why wasn't everyone told of this? Kakashi sighed. Akatsuki has become a well-known name amongst the shinobi now. Their recent exploits have shown how dangerous they are. The Godine couldn't risk letting too many people know since it could cause panic. Sasuke stared at the Junin who was the referee for the final matches. The Hyuga was standing in the middle of the stadium calmly. Does he know? Kakashi turned to where Sasuke was looking. His eyes came in contact with the form of Neji. No, the Sandaim's law is still in effect. We aren't allowed to speak of Kyuubi to anyone of the younger generation. Letting him know would have caused too many questions. In the end he would have figured it out. He sighed, though. I think he's already suspicious since he was the only Junin not allowed in the meeting. Sasuke leaned against the railing, resting his arms. You let me know because I already am aware of the Kyuubi. Kakashi gave a lazy smile obscured by his face mask. Precisely. He turned to walk away, but, you are also one of few who would stand a chance against one of their members. The ex-Anbu walked away to resume his duties as a guard of the village. Sasuke closed his eyes as he understood a few more connections between Naruto's actions and the current events. Dobe, you've known all along. XXXXXXXXXX. Naruto put on the necklace he had won from Tsunade 3 years prior when she challenged him to learning the technique Rasengan within a week. His seal was inactive, leaving him at the best of his capability as well, giving his muscles their much-needed rest. It was still early in the morning and the sun was shining fiercely, illuminating everything its light touched. He focused knowing that the Akatsuki would be coming today. Letting out a deep sigh to calm himself, he picked up his jacket and put it on. He moved to the small drawer at the side of his bed. Kneeling down he opened one of the compartments. Inside was a scroll along with 6 of the special kunai he needed to perform the Hiraishin no Jutsu. He had stored the rest of the kunai within the scroll since he knew that carrying so many was imprudent due to the amount they weighed as well as how many there were. He retrieved only a single kunai from the miniature compartment before closing it. Putting the scroll in his pouch he performed his signature hand seal before a shadow clone appeared in front of him. The shadow clone had a serious demeanor just like Naruto. Clearing his throat, the Jinchuriki addressed the doppelganger, investigate the outskirts and make sure you're not destroyed. If you find anything out of the ordinary, let me know. The clone nodded before leaving his sight. Naruto heard his door close, signaling the clone's departure to begin exploring. He knew that security had been increased and it was a lot tighter than it had ever been, however he needed to send his own scout just in case there was something they had missed. Naruto heard cheers from the distance. They were a sign that the final matches were underway. It was time to leave for the stadium if he wanted to make it in time to see Konohamaru's match. He figured it would be the last one since everyone was eager to see how good of a ninja the Sandaim's grandson was. XXXXXXXXXX. Deodara coolly observed the scene in front of him. His eyes were wandering from the various shinobi on guard along Konoha's walls. They've been expecting us, yeah. His statement caused his partner to turn to him. What do you mean, senpai? The blonde criminal had an angry fire within his eyes. They knew we were coming, yeah. Toby looked towards the distance at the security present. What makes you say that? Deodara smacked the clueless criminal. Are you blind, dumbass? Toby rubbed his head. Gomen, I mean, everyone has increased their security because of us. What makes them different? Deodara s his head as he knew that he would have to explain. Didn't you notice that we didn't even have to fly into the country? There were hardly any border guards unlike everywhere else. The reason why, is because most of the shinobi have been called back to guard the damn village, yeah. Toby looked at the wall of Konoha. So. Deodara began to retreat deeper into the forest as his black-haired partner followed him. They jumped through the trees until they had a fair amount of distance between themselves and the village of Konoha. Deodara stopped at one of the trees before facing Toby. Somebody let them know, yeah. Toby looked at the older shinobi. We have a spy. Deodara folded his arms as he began to think about the problematic situation. Maybe, if we do, there are only two possible candidates. Toby scratched his head. Who? Deodara sighed before speaking. The only two who do their assignments alone. I doubt it's Zetsu since he was the second in this organization. There's no way a spy would have decided to enter Akatsuki all that time ago and remain undiscovered, yeah. Toby sat back on the branch of the tree he was standing on, so it's not Zetsu-senpai. Deodara nodded his head. Then it only leaves her. The art-appreciating criminal paused for a few seconds before resuming. There's still too many problems, yeah. Toby shook his head. I don't understand, senpai. Deodara stared at the floor of the forest. Zetsu is the one who gathers our intel. Itachi, Kisame and Hiden went to Kaorakimaru on the information he had gathered. If we do have a spy and it isn't him, then that means we're being screwed from two sides, yeah. Toby stood up. What are we going to do? Deodara formed a sculpture in the form of a small bird. I'm going to attack the village. I'll get the job done. You wait here just in case, yeah. Toby nodded before speaking. What about a distraction, senpai? Deodara shook his head. You need to make sure you leave a trail for the little S to follow, yeah. If you draw attention to yourself, then you won't be able to do that. The two criminals turned to stare at the trees as they felt a faint chakra signal approaching. It was clear that whoever was approaching was trying to hide their chakra, but they didn't conceal it completely. Both of the Akatsuki members hid as the person revealed himself. Deodara's eyes widened as he recognized the mop of yellow hair as well as the whisker marks adorning his cheeks. He didn't make a move, wanting to see exactly what was going on. He looked in the direction of Toby, who was calmly observing the doppelganger on the ground. Naruto's shadow clone looked at the area before dispelling himself. Toby jumped onto the forest floor. A shadow clone. I wonder who that was. Deodara landed on the hard ground next to his partner. That was our target, yeah. Toby tilted his head. He's the Jinchuriki. Deodara let the bird sculpture in his hand onto the ground as a cloud of smoke engulfed the area. In place of the small bird figurine was now a large bird capable of transporting up to two people. Deodara jumped onto the bird's back. It looked like he was scouting. They definitely knew we were coming, yeah. Toby sat back on the ground. How do you know where to go? Deodara smirked, preparing to fly. Where I can make the biggest bang, yeah. XXXXXXXXXXX. Tsunade looked on as the third match of the first round finished. Originally there were 9 compeers after the second test, however Udon had got injured during the training month, hence being eliminated from the matchups. This led to having an equal amount of contestants, which was fine by the Hokage. The Leaf hadn't been doing very well as Mogi had got eliminated, letting her sooner opponent into the next round. The shinobis from the hidden village of Rain had the most success so far, with 2 of their shinobis advancing. The Godime had been dragged to the stadium early on due to her assistant Shizune and the fact that Gaara had already headed there. The fights so far had been very good, with none of the compeers forfeiting and fighting until they couldn't go on. She looked to the side at the Kazekage. Well, your shinobi won the last match, but how much are you willing to bet that the Leaf will be victorious in this battle? Shizune clutched onto Tun harder as the small pig squealed. Tsunade-sama, you shouldn't be betting during such serious situations. The Hokage ignored her frantic assistant as Gaara turned to face her, his expression as anonymous as always. I don't gamble. Tsunade raised an eyebrow at the young Kage whilst Shizune gave a relieved sigh. Whatever, I would have won. She looked through the crowds as the ground below was being prepared for the final match of the first round. Where are you, Naruto? An Anbu appeared in front of the busty blonde. Report, Hokage-sama. Tsunade leaned back in her uncomfortable chair before telling him to go ahead. The masked shinobi nodded. So far there have been no suspicious activities or signs that Akatsuki has appeared. However, there was an odd plume of smoke in a deeper region of the forest which is currently being investigated. That is all. Tsunade had a stern demeanor as she spoke. Very well, Tenzu. Make sure everyone remains alert. She sighed. Now if only I knew where that barker was. Tenzu stopped himself from leaving. I saw Naruto entering the stands a few minutes ago, Hokage-sama. Performing a quick bow, the shinobi known to Team 7 as Yamato disappeared from sight, returning to his post. XXXXXXXXXX. Naruto walked through the stands, the roar of the crowd filling his ears. He hoped he wasn't too late as began to descend the stairs to get a seat close to the front. He stopped as a flash of information flowed through his mind. He analyzed what he learnt as his clone dispelled itself. There were no signs at all of the Akatsuki, however the Jinchuriki figured they must have covered up their whereabouts well. He was broken from his thoughts as he heard someone shout his name. Looking towards the front row, he saw Sakura waving at him along with Ino at her side. He smiled before making his way down the rest of the steps and eventually towards the kunoikas. Ohio, Sakura-chan. Leaning inwards he gave the pink-haired medic a quick K much to the astonishment of the blonde kunoiki seated. Ino raised an eyebrow. When did this happen? Sakura gave a chuckle as the two shinobi sat down. About a month ago. Ino's mouth fell open as Naruto observed the surroundings. Why didn't you tell me? Sakura scratched her forehead. This is the first time we've had the chance to actually talk over the past month. I've been busy. Ino folded her legs as she looked at the stadium floor. Fine, but you could have told me a little earlier. Sakura shook her head. I'm surprised Hinata, Kiba or Shino didn't tell you. They were probably the first ones to know. Ino whirled around to face her friend. You told them before me. The kunoiki was stopped from continuing their conversation as Naruto spoke. Oi, what's Neji doing down there? Ino sighed. He's the referee for the matches. Naruto nodded, acknowledging her response as he saw Konohamaru make his way onto the clearing along with a sand nin. Did Mogi and Udon make it through? Sakura leaned back. Udon didn't enter since he got injured training and Mogi lost to a sand nin. She did well but he had too much stamina for her to keep up. Naruto grinned. She tried her best though, right? He took in a deep breath before leaning over the railings. Kick his ass Konohamaru. You hear me? Naruto's loud statement took everyone with shock as Konohamaru looked at the older shinobi with a grin and nodded. Sakura quickly pulled Naruto back into his seat. Control yourself. Naruto gave his trademark foxy grin before waiting for the match to start. He knew that Sakura had no idea of what he was expecting to happen today but thought it was for the best. Ino addressed the genin. Oi, Naruto, do you know anything about why the village is on high alert? Sakura listened intently, waiting for the energetic ninja to respond as she was curious also as to what the reason was. Naruto calmly spoke. It could be anything. I wasn't told why. Naruto knew that he wasn't telling the truth since he did know why, however it wasn't a complete lie due to the god I'm not actually telling him. He had found out from Jiraiya a month ago about Akatsuki's plans. The crowd around him erupted into cheer as the final bout of the first round began. Naruto keenly observed Konohamaru as he began to fight. The Sarutobi started by relying on his taijutsu capabilities, whereas the Suna Nin was fighting mostly with ninjutsu. His arsenal consisted mainly of Doton Jutsu. The people began to applaud as Konohamaru avoided a rock throw to plant a hard hit on the sand shinobi's face. Naruto smiled as he saw the younger genin begin a combination of punches to try and put an end to the fight as quickly as possible. Sakura looked on interested. He's quite good. Ino laughed before adding her own comment. Yeah, looks like he can fight as big as he can talk. Naruto ran a hand through his spiky hair. This is important to Konohamaru. He isn't here just for himself. The kunoikis looked at him as he resumed. He's fighting for the honor of being a Sarutobi. There's no way he's going to lose. Sakura smiled at the blonde before looking towards the match again. Konohamaru had been sent sprawling across the ground courtesy of a Doton Jutsu. He slowly rose with B across his face. The match continued as a back-and-forth affair with both shinobi trying their hardest to overwhelm the other. The crowd continuously cheered, appreciating the action-packed display. Naruto found his thoughts wandering to Akatsuki again. Kuso, what the hell is going on? He blinked as he looked towards Konohamaru, who had now trapped the Suna Nin via his blue scarf. He remembered the Sarutobi tried to apply a similar technique against him, but it wasn't very effective. However, the Suna Nin was bound in countless spots, rendering his arms immobile. Konohamaru unleashed a last attack, pummeling the Suna Nin with numerous punches and kicks. Naruto gave a victorious smirk as he saw the Suna Nin flying through the air. It's over. Neji signaled the end of the match as the crowd began to cheer deafeningly for the young Sarutobi. Naruto got up from his seat, giving a whistle as Sakura and Ino laughed and cheered at the great display. The Jinchuriki wiped the smile off his face as he felt the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Looking towards Konohamaru, he saw something descending towards the unsuspecting genin. His eyes widened. Konohamaru. He rapidly jumped from the stands through the air. His actions took everyone by surprise, but other shinobi quickly understood what happened when they saw what he was trying to intercept. Naruto entered the path of the clay sculpture, heading towards the genin below. Throwing out his hands, he yelled, "Arakurukas!" A raving wind encircled him, but before he could throw it outwards to decimate the approaching it contacted, blasting him towards the stadium wall. A shadow loomed over the stadium as the crowd looked on, afraid of what just had happened. Neji looked towards the sky as he saw the trademark cloak of the Akatsuki fluttering along with the wearer smirking at him down below. Deidara laughed. Art is bang yeah. Deidara didn't give time for the shinobi to react as he swiftly threw a few more art pieces at the walls of the stadium, making them crumble. Tsunade was on her feet as Gaara looked at the stadium walls collapsing. He raised his hands as sand began to run across the walls to keep them stable. Concentrating harder, the ground began to change as he condensed the minerals in order to form more sand. The newly created sand quickly ran up the walls as he began to close off any openings so the spectators would be safe. Sasuke, who was in the highest part of the stands, began to run through the frantic crowd as they tried to escape harm. He saw the sand closing all possible means of the spectators being able to intrude on the battleground. Dodging the escaping people, he jumped over the railings as the sand closed off all gaps in the stadium. He landed on the hard ground as he looked towards the laughing blonde in the sky. Pulling out a few shuriken, he launched them at the criminal in the sky. Deidara swerved, avoiding the projectiles. Tsunade looked on at the carnage but gave a sigh of relief as the Kazekage stopped everything from collapsing. She looked towards the young Kage, who was visibly sweating. Turning her attention towards her assistant, she spoke in a commanding tone, "Tell all guarding shinobi to focus on evacuating the people. He can't keep this up long." Shizune nodded as the Godime rolled up her sleeves to begin battling. Neji looked on as Sasuke ran up the stadium wall, which was covered in sand. He looked towards Konohamaru. "Try not to get in the way." The Sarutobi nodded as he saw the Uchiha attempting to get close to the flying Akatsuki member. Neji activated his Byakugan before withdrawing a kunai. He saw Sasuke miss with his attack before falling back towards the ground and landing on his feet. Neji looked at the Uchiha and gave him a nod. They both began to run at the stadium wall before vertically climbing with their feet. Neji jumped backwards off the sand-covered wall, flying through the air. Sasuke followed after having gone a little higher and was getting closer to Neji in midair. The Hyuga turned vertical so his head was facing the ground as Sasuke's feet landed on his. Neji put all his might into pushing the Uchiha upwards. Sasuke smirked as he received the boost needed to send him soaring towards his target. Approaching the clay bird, he clasped its ankle, jerking it back. Deidara, taken by surprise at the sudden jolt of movement, failed to see a kick heading his way. Sasuke connected with his leg on the blonde's face, throwing him off his transport. Jumping onto the bird, he followed after the falling Akatsuki and began to throw more punches at him. Deidara, who wasn't well versed in taijutsu, blocked as much as he could before kicking him away and landing on the hard ground. He quickly jumped out of the way as a punch impacted where he was standing, leaving a large crater. He looked at the Godime who withdrew her fist from the now decimated rock beneath her. Deodara laughed as he saw the three shinobi surround him. It was a great welcoming party, yeah. Before they could do anything, he threw a few more around him, blowing up the ground and covering the area in dust. His large transport swooped downwards as he jumped onto it. Flying towards the air, he molded a new shape in the form of a clay doll which quickly became as large as the transport he was standing on. Gaara looked at the Akatsuki who had attacked him months ago. He recognized the shape of the clay doll as it had been the same technique that the blonde criminal attempted to destroy Sunakaga with. He looked towards the ground where the dust was slowly clearing. Deodara shouted at the Leaf Nin, "Let's see what you can do against my specialty number 18. The clay doll began to descend towards the stadium ground at a rapid pace. Gaara knew that if it impacted it would decimate the entire stadium to bits. He hoped that the spectators had been evacuated as he let go of the sand holding the walls up. Throwing out his hand, the sand rushed for the large swallowing it up in layers of thick sand. The clay doll exploded, making the ball of sand it was contained in expand tremendously. Gaara felt a lot of his chakra leave him as he controlled the to make sure it couldn't escape. As it finished, he let go, resulting in the sand to slowly fall in the direction of the ground below. The Godime diverted her attention from the falling sand to the stadium walls as they began to crumble. She looked through the stands, sighing when she saw that the spectators were either out of harm's way or had been evacuated. Naruto slowly rose to his feet as he coughed. B fell onto the ground as he saw his damaged state. His jacket had been obliterated and his shirt had various holes in it. He looked at the carnage around him. Half of the stadium walls had turned into rubble and there were numerous holes over the floor. He panted, wiping the bee from his mouth, and turned his attention to the center of the ground where Sasuke, Neji and the Godime stood. Deodara had an angry expression across his face as his attempted deconstruction had been foiled. He looked to the side as he saw Naruto awake and alert. "Hey S." His insult caught the Jinchuriki's attention. "Not so strong are you really? You can't protect anything, yeah." Neji, Sasuke and the Godime turned to where Deodara was talking to set their interest on a reawakened Naruto. Neji's eyes went wide as he stared at the sight of Naruto. He could clearly see all his coils as a menacing red chakra swirled around them relentlessly. He began to sweat as he recognized the ominous chakra as the same one that surrounded Naruto when he fought against the Yondaime. The strangest thing about it was that it seemed alive and was acting on its own. Naruto stared in disbelief at the familiar criminal in the sky. He thought he had been killed months before by Kakashi. His thoughts returned to the stadium and the condition everything was in, Kuso. Deodara laughed at the angry Leaf Nin before beginning to fly away from the stadium. Naruto's eyes were full of rage as he ran up the stadium wall to chase him. Neji shook away his stupor as he also began to run along with Sasuke. The Godime, recognizing the shinobi's actions, quickly spoke, "Wait." Both the Hyuga and Uchiha stopped as they were called by the Hokage. Tsunade, having got their attention, gave her order, "Sasuke, you continue with the pursuit and make sure they don't get Naruto, there might be another one of them." Sasuke nodded before taking off. "Neji, I need you to remain here just in case we require the Byakugan to diagnose any injuries." The Hyuga nodded as he began to analyze what he just heard from the Hokage. The Akatsuki had come for Naruto and were willing to attack the strongest shinobi village in the world for their objective. He didn't have time to continue thinking as Sakura made her way over to them. "Tsunade Shisu." The Godime looked at her apprentice. "How many injured are there?" Sakura stopped as she neared the Hokage. "We've got 4 critically injured and over 40 with minor injuries. Ino's already began treating them." Tsunade nodded as she began to make her way to the wounded spectators. "We should get to work." Sakura stared at her mentor walk away as she looked over the ground for a sign of Naruto. She was worried for him as the last thing she saw was him getting thrown into the now decimated walls. "Where's Naruto?" Neji was the one to answer her question. "He's gone after the Akatsuki attacker. Sasuke has as well." Sakura stared at the proud Hyuga whose eyes were focused on the ground. He was clearly troubled by something as he was clenching his fists. She began to worry as to what might happen to the Jinchuriki having been told that he had ran after the S-class criminal. "Naruto, be safe. XXXXXXXXXX." Naruto jumped from building to building as he chased after Deodara, who was maniacally laughing at his efforts. His fists were clenched tightly as his anger was on the verge of exploding. He couldn't believe the damage one person could do to their village. Deodara had left a trail of destruction throughout the village thanks to his clay in order to try and slow down the genin in pursuit. Even though some shinobi had joined the chase with Naruto, they had to stop and help citizens as the Akatsuki member continuously threw to make sure there weren't too many people after him. Naruto didn't understand how the criminal had such an accurate aim from a large distance but believed it was to do with the scope in his left eye. Naruto put his hand into his pouch withdrawing the special kunai which he had been training with over the past week. He wasn't great at performing the Hiraishin no Jutsu but he could eat it nonetheless. Gripping it tightly, he knew that it was the only way he could get close enough to the flying criminal. Deodara crafted another of his DB before throwing it in the direction of Naruto. The Jinchuriki saw the descending clay form and jumped out of the way at the last second. Deodara looked behind him eagerly at the column of smoke that rose from where he attacked. Bringing his transport round, he headed closer to see where the genin had ran to. He formed another one of his artworks waiting for the dust to settle. His eyes went wide as he saw a kunai fly through the calming smoke straight at his head. He moved his head to the side avoiding the kunai but a flash appeared in front of his eyes as his transport screeched giving a sudden movement. Pain filled the blonde artist's senses as he looked to his right arm to see a kunai implanted deeply in his skin along with a furious Naruto staring at him. Naruto threw a punch at the criminal but Deodara pulled on his clay bird as it moved to the left avoiding Naruto and leaving him to fall to the ground, an enraged expression on his face. Bastard, I just had this reattached, yeah. Naruto landed onto the ground, instantly looking towards the sky at the S-class criminal. I'm going to rip every limb off your body. Deodara looked at the kunai in his hand observing the strange seal tied around it. I don't think you have time to worry about fighting me, yeah. He smirked upon finishing. Naruto looked around him at the columns of smoke rising from various parts of Konoha. He gritted his teeth in anger. You came here for me, didn't you? Now you're telling me you don't have time to fight. Deodara pocketed the kunai with which he had been attacked. I'll come back for you, yeah. The missing nin moved to the side as shuriken flew past him signaling the entrance of Uchiha Sasuke. Sasuke landed next to Naruto. It's not about you having time to fight. You're dying here. Deodara grinned as he looked at the Sharingan wielder. You can't even get close to me. I don't see how you're going to K me, yeah. He turned his transport around before addressing Naruto. As long as you're here, expect us to return, yeah. With his last words said, he ascended higher into the air before flying off. Naruto closed his eyes knowing it was futile to run after him. He had been preparing to fight the notorious organization for 2 months now, but they had just entered his village and left a path of devastation. Sasuke stared at his friend whom he had been in little contact with ever since he had found out about his death. He now realized that he failed to see how much of an effect this was having on Naruto. Contrary to the facade the Jinchuriki was displaying, it was evident now to the Uchiha how serious and desperate the situation was for him. He looked towards Naruto's hands which were dripping with B. All this training, it's for them, isn't it? His comment was a statement rather than a question. Naruto opened his eyes, his voice calm. Yeah. He turned to walk away from the Uchiha as he was contemplating a decision in his mind. Rubbing his left forearm he walked in the direction of his home. Sasuke looked at the Uzumaki as he walked away into the distance. He knew that he was deep in thought from the expression on his visage. Turning around he saw the state the village was in and knew that his help would be required. He took off in the direction of the stadium to report to the Hokage. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.